natural beauty, you know. Yeah, no, I've never been someone shy until I seen your eyes. Still I had to try, yeah. Oh yes, let me get my words right and then approach you. Woman, I'll treat you like a man is supposed to. You'll never have to cry, no. I know everyone can relate to when they find a special someone. And she's royal, yeah, so royal. And I want her in my life. I never knew anyone so one of a kind, no. The way she moves to her own beat, she has the qualities of a queen. She's a queen. Ooh, ooh, what a natural beauty. No need no makeup to be a cutie. She's a queen. She's a queen. And when they ask what a good woman's made of, she's not afraid and ashamed of who she is. She's royal, yeah, so royal. And I need her in my life. I never knew anyone so one of a kind until the night that I seen her rise.
Happy New Year, my heavens. Well, actually, I'll explain why it's not Happy New Year, but it should be a joyous and a blessed New Year in a moment. But for now, thank you for tuning in to Diplomatically Speaking. This is Dr. Ron Metzger with you. The first show of 2015. We are glad, we are excited that we have been allowed to make it through 2014 into 2015. Let's give the Lord a big praise and a shout out. Well, we are starting off the year talking about a really very important issue. Well, all of our issues that we talk about are important, but this is particularly important. It's also very personal, because I would dare to say that very few of us have not been impacted by the issue of deportation, either of our friends or family members who have heard about this matter. And so we wanted to start off the year with a program, a discussion that we feel could be particularly helpful to our listeners. And we have none other than a top expert, Michael Wiles. I'll tell you a little bit about his background later on. Really interesting fellow coming out of an interesting legal background, a family legal background that has lots of precedence really in terms of his particular preparedness to hold forth with us on this issue of deportation. Welcome again. This is WVIP 93.5 FM. You're listening to Dr. Ron Metzger on Diplomatically Speaking. And let me acknowledge our family of sponsors, beginning, of course, with our title sponsor, Tower Isle Frozen Foods.
Flavor of the Caribbean to America with Tower Isle's Jamaican-style patties. Available at your local supermarket in beef or chicken. Tower Isles is the leading manufacturer and distributor of Jamaican-style patties and has led the industry in quality food products for more than 45 years. Tower Isles patties are made with the best ingredients. Grade A USDA beef and chunky white chicken breast. Great for a snack or purchase them for your wedding, party, or your restaurant. Enjoy a Jamaican-style patty from Tower Isles. Give them a call at 678-422-3196. That's 678-422-3196. And don't forget to check your local supermarket for Tower Isles Jamaican-style patties.
Tower Isles, good, fantastic. Thank you, Tower Isle, for your support over 2014, and of course for your ongoing support in 2015, and that applies to all of our sponsors, of course, the next of which is Caribbean Life newspaper, the largest Caribbean diaspora newspaper in North America, keeping us up to date and up to speed. Thank you for your support in 2014 and your ongoing support in 2015. And lastly, but certainly not least, diasporadashboard.com. We're the Caribbean, and it's Diaspora Meet, the online destination for all things local in the diaspora in the US, UK, and Canada. Promote your events for free on the events calendar, and you should watch out for some new and exciting things happening on the dashboard in 2015, people. Hope that you will get online and like us. Again, a joyous and blessed New Year. The homily this morning was interesting. Of course, it was very apt for the New Year, and our deacon reminded us that, happy depends on your circumstances. So if you have money in the bank, you're happy. If your husband love you or your wife love you, you're happy. But joyous, that comes from within. That comes from a certain security, a certain blessed assurance, which, we have as people of faith and people who believe in the risen Jesus. So have a joyous and blessed New Year, everyone out there listening within earshot of my voice. And thank you so much for tuning in this Sunday afternoon for another segment of Diplomatically Speaking. We're going to be talking with Michael Wiles, a very famous and actually very much engaged in the community around immigration law and on the particular issue of deportation in light of President Obama's recent announcement, in fact, of what we're calling deferred deportation. But before we get into the issue in detail, let us give a little Old Lang Syne shot. We played a little bit of this last weekend, but I just want to kind of bring in the new year again with, a signature song, Old Lang Syne. This is the beginning of 2015, people. Another year of promise and of hopefulness and all of peace, prosperity, health, and good wishes coming from my heart to you. Well, we have our guest on the phone right now. He is Michael Wiles of Wiles and Weinberg. He's managing partner at the firm. And he actually has been on the program before several months ago. And it's a pleasure, really, to welcome him back to the show. Michael, are you there?
I am. Thank you very much for having me.
You are very welcome indeed. It is our pleasure to have you on. And I hope I don't embarrass you too much, Michael, but I'd like to share with our listeners just a bit about your background. You are a managing partner in Wiles and Weinberger, and you share your time between the firm's three offices, which is one is in New York, another in Englewood, and the other one in Miami. The firm was founded in 1960 by your dad, Leon Wiles, whose best-known accomplishment was his successful representation of John Lennon in his widely publicized deportation proceedings, the circumstances of which have inspired several films and documentaries. The firm specializes exclusively in the practice of U.S. immigration and nationality law. And more than 50 years since its inception, your firm continues to serve a distinguished domestic and international clientele and covers all areas of U.S. immigration law, including employment and investment-based immigration, work permits, permanent residence for qualified individuals, family-based immigration, asylum applications, and temporary and permanent type visas. In addition to running a highly successful immigration law practice, Michael serves as counsel to Lincoln Center and two international corporate law firms. A former federal prosecutor with the United States Attorney's Office in Brooklyn from 1989 to 1993, our guest has testified on Capitol Hill in connection with anti-terrorism legislation and is a frequent participant on professional panels and commentator on network television and radio. I've caught a couple of your shows with regard to U.S. immigration law, employer sanctioned work and compliance. And he is internationally renowned for his successful representation of distinguished individuals and corporate clients, such as performing artists, directors, writers, models, actors. Where were you when Shabba Ranks and all of them need you, Michael? We can talk about that another thing. Athletes, race car drivers, fine artists, art dealers, curators, and literary agents. But Michael is here today. I should also say that, Michael, you served as mayor for 2 terms of Englewood, New Jersey, and you were appointed to the District Appeals Board of the Selective Service System for the state of New Jersey. You were a member of the New Jersey Governor's Blue Panel on Immigration, and you were a frequent participant on professional panels and a commentator on a variety of issues. It is indeed a pleasure to welcome you and to really hold forth with you on particularly on this issue of deportation, which is timely. As you know, our president has just announced that he will be taking executive action granting deportation relief to millions of undocumented persons living in the United States. There's a lot of pushback actually from the Republican Party and several groups, of course. And we are here not to talk so much about the politics of it, Michael, but its particular relevance to the 4.4 million persons who are indeed eligible, if not necessarily qualified, but eligible for this, and specifically Caribbean Americans, since this is these are the listeners that you're talking to. So again, welcome. Let us...
My pleasure. Thank you for such a gracious invitation. You should also know that my family and I just came fresh off a cruise ship, much like many of the immigrants a generation ago, and we had the privilege of getting to meet personally with many wonderful visitors and immigrants from the Caribbean. So I feel personally at home in your radio station in Domain.
That is very nice of you to say. So you had a cruise to the Caribbean, I assume. So you were kind of in Caribbean waters, or is it elsewhere?
That's right. That's one way to go find clients.
Very creative.
And bring dripping wet life jackets or waterproof business cards.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Always the consummate professional, always working. Well, let me tell you something. We need you. We need that kind of dedication because, unfortunately, there is a too large number of persons who are being deported. And, of course, many of them or most of them are they're breaking the law. So I just want to make it clear that we're not saying persons should not be deported, but we certainly want to understand what the law means for those who are somehow on the list with respect to the new executive order coming out of the current, President Obama's administration. So we're talking about deferred deportation. So could you just give us a kind of a 30-second summary of what Mr. Obama or President Obama is trying to do?
I'm honored to do so. And as you said so eloquently, we are trying to keep the good guys here and make sure that the bad guys do get deported. I don't think there is anybody within your radio audience that wouldn't agree that it's about time. This president, unlike any other president, despite all of the overtures that he has made to the immigrant community, has deported more people. So it is with a big hug and an open arm that we welcome what is being proposed. The original Deferred Action Program, implemented in 2012, derived its origins actually from the case that my father handled when he did represent John Lennon. So we take personal pride and authorship with the fact that John Lennon, the first dreamer, actually facilitated, and we learned of the program where the government deferred over 1,800 individuals in those days, even though they were drugsters and mobsters and all kinds of bad things for better reasons to keep them in America and to keep their families
So it's
together.
very interesting because our listeners are not aware of this. This business of prosecutorial discretion is kind of the little caveat that the lawyers, the immigration, the INS, was using to using their own discretion to retain persons who have gone follow the law and who in fact were eligible for deportation. That prosecutorial discretion was being utilized to keep those persons in there. And that was brought about or that was discovered actually by your dad.
That's right. That's right. And then the president rested his hat on the same jurisprudence, the same cases that evolved over time, where he effectively agreed in 2012 to a deferred action program providing a 2-year status and employment authorization to people who had arrived in America under the age of 16,
Right.
were under the age of 30, and had continuously resided in America for at least 5 years preceding June of 2012, and were present in America as of June of 2012.
Right.
The candidates had to be currently in school, have graduated from high school, or obtained a general education, or honorably discharged. Imagine people were serving in our military, or Coast Guard, or armed forces, and they had no status.
They had no status. Interesting.
And they have to make sure that they were not convicted of any felony offense or a significant misdemeanor offense. So DUIs, for your listening audience, are critical, particularly multiple misdemeanor offenses or otherwise pose a threat to our nation's security or public safety.
Very interesting. And
I'm sorry.
And there are 4.4 million undocumented population in the program, which this program is likely to affect.
Right.
I have read where Caribbean persons are at a particular disadvantage under this program, or is this an overstatement?
You know, every community feels advantaged or disadvantaged. We see, because of the trends over the years, we've been doing this now upwards of our sixth decade, where each community, because of the culture and the mores and the experience, is different. The Israeli community, for example, where it's customary for people to go into the military rather than go into universities, faces a challenge. The Caribbean American community faces other challenges because there isn't a lot of proof often of their entry into the United States, and it's important that people document these things particularly.
Well, that's interesting. What do you mean people document? When you enter the United States, doesn't the U.S., as a function of its customs duty, give you some official stamp or document that confirms your entry?
The cultural experience has been, particularly for people from Mexico and others that are contiguous to the United States, that they enter without inspection.
I see.
The Caribbean community is a different experience. Overall, our experience has been it's one that is coming in on a B1, B2 visitor's visa and then overstays. So you do have proof of an entry, or the parent or the grandparent can prove their entries. But either way, Homeland Security does estimate about 4.4 million people are eligible.
Right.
But the benefits are only temporary, and
This
there's
is
no
interesting.
guarantee
They're
that the
temporary.
program was going to stay in place. Even this new program is not
Right.
guaranteed to be staying in place. The
Explain
initial
what you mean
program-
by that when you say it's temporary.
Well, in other words, this is merely a Band-Aid. The government is saying for the next 2 years, on the old program and now in the current program, for the next 3 years, we will defer taking action against you. That doesn't mean in 2 or 3 years' time that the government won't then
I see.
decide otherwise. A new Pharaoh that biblically came that doesn't remember Joseph.
Right. There you go. Exactly. Very interesting.
We
I
have
like
to be
your
careful.
invoking of some scripture there, Michael. Very interesting.
That's right. So the initial program, the government estimated 1.2 million people were eligible,
But you're right.
but actually less than 700,000 people applied.
So it is your suggestion, of course, strong suggestion, that people apply?
Absolutely. It's critical, but you have to see somebody competent, and it doesn't have to be a lawyer, but it should be somebody who's well-versed in this to make sure that there is no reason to negate your eligibility, that you do not have an untoward history. The government, thankfully, will make this form and process so easy that people don't require lawyers, but I still recommend, and for your listening audience, we will make an arrangement so that we do it according to what each person can afford.
Okay, I want to, before I get into the details in terms of how our listeners can make practical use of this information, I do want to spend a little bit more time on the foundation on which the president is basing or has based this announcement, because that may have some implication for its ability to be extended as a program under the subsequent president, because of course he ends his term. This whole issue of prosecutorial discretion, as we pointed out earlier in the program, that way back for John Lennon, your dad discovered that this prosecutorial discretion existed within the immigration laws and, in fact, was being used. The numbers show 1,843 instances in which the INS had invoked such prosecutorial discretion as part of a secret program for non-priority cases. Okay, does that prosecutorial discretion obtain? Does it continue?
Once it's granted, unless you leave the United States, and there are strong actions and regulations that gird the use of it if you travel, generally it sticks. It's interesting, just to put it in context.
Yes.
President Nixon at the time wanted John Lennon out when 18-year-olds were first given the right to vote, and who in those days controlled the narrative against the Vietnam War and the Dump Nixon rally more than the Beatles and the peaceniks of those days.
Right.
And John faced removal proceedings simply because Nixon wanted to use a conviction to get him out and get him away from influencing his bid for re-election.
Well, I don't know how simple that is, Michael, just to be fair. The fact of the matter is that John Lennon was found with cannabis, in our parlance is ganja or marijuana, in 1968, and he was convicted for having that drug, and it did make him eligible for deportation. He was convicted for possession, so he was eligible for deportation. On top of that,
not exactly.
Oh, really?
I'll tell you why. The law prohibited marijuana, and when my father, who you should know, is 81 years young and still practicing.
God bless him, yes. You just had a big event to honor him recently. I missed it. I'm so sorry.
Right.
It was
He's
fantastic.
still practicing, thank God, coming in every day. My father proved with a very important professor at Harvard Medical School that the statute that precluded people from marijuana did not include cannabis. And my father then had to prove a few things. Number one, John's conviction should have been thrown out because he didn't have the intent. It was somebody who had actually planted the narcotic. They had done it for the Rolling Stones and a few others. So he couldn't be held culpable for something he didn't have the intent. Number two, that the substance itself was not marijuana, and the statute ran strictly against marijuana. And finally, and this was masterful, my father was able to prove, because of the politics of that time, through many lawsuits in different courts and then going to a court of appeals, that there was selective prosecution, and he discovered through the Freedom of Information Act and other efforts that he prosecuted that there was a secret program, that the government had a non-priority, where they had a system where they would absorb bad eggs for good reasons. People who had greater equity, who had developed this diamond in the rough, this American experiment in democracy, had recognized that not everybody goes to university, people do make mistakes, and that there's a greater good to keep families and businesses and other people together. And out of the jurisprudence and of the cultivation of those 1,800 cases that my father had seen, he then made the case and successfully won it. And it's interesting, John agreed to do this despite the fact that there were other ways for him to win his case.
Very
because he felt it would be useful to other people. Little did he know that years later he would be meritorious and that the president would be relying on this.
Well, it's remarkable because the work of your dad really led to the old agency of INS making its policy about prosecutorial discretion and non-priority status public for the first time. So that came out of the closet.
We're very grateful, and it goes to show, and there's no better field that shows the advocacy for the individual, and there's no better son who appreciates the contributions of his father, who, in the handling of a simple case, was able to set the stage for a generation later. It's so important for your listeners to understand, no matter what your stock in life is, how you can contribute if you're diligent. Here, my dad had no idea who the Beatles were. He thought it was a band called The Bugs, and he was embarrassed when he came home to my mother that evening.
Who's John Lennon?
Explain why he was late. And then he took a cab ride in a couple of nights later because he had met him always at nighttime after the practice.
I see.
And it was a Caribbean American who had to pull over to the side and explain to my father who John Lennon was.
Get out of town. Are you joshing me?
I'm not.
Very interesting. It all comes together, Michael. Here it is. How many? 1968. That's the year I came here, January 6, 1968.
Yeah, the case was in the early 70s.
Yeah.
And it developed a very strong affinity in our family. My father got very close with John. My father bought, as he calls them, dungarees, his first pair of jeans. And then he and John would dress together to go to court, and they developed a very strong courtship and relationship.
Well, it also shows the kind of advocacy and the kind of flexibility and intelligence and expertise that this field demands. And, this is the point I want to make to my listeners. The history is important, but I think the point is that, when you're dealing with this issue, you need an attorney who is not just, quote unquote, has the degree and says he or she practices immigration law, but has the agility, the ability to bring that level of intelligence and advocacy to the table on his or her client's behalf.
So important. I teach in a law school at Cardozo Law School. My father taught there for 33 years, and I have the privilege now of teaching a business immigration law class. And I hire a lot of my students straight out of school because of their personalities and their vigilance and their love of people. The book Smarts you can buy, and the law is not hard. It's a matter of diligence and perseverance.
Absolutely. Well, it's very interesting you mentioned Cardozo, because my mentee, Nakisha Duncan, I hope she won't mind if I mention her on this program, she was accepted to Cardozo Law School, and I wrote her an recommendation. So I'm going to tell her that your dad is teaching a course. I think she's interested.
My dad retired from teaching. I'm actually teaching.
Oh, you're teaching the course. Well, I'm going to.
She's welcome to join us.
Yes, I'm going to give
of your
her
listeners who just go to our website, they'll end up seeing some of the material on this that shows this. And there was a television interview on MSNBC that my dad and I sat for a few weeks ago that speaks really significantly to the evolution of this new privilege that's going to be accorded immigrants.
This is very important. Michael, take a moment, please, to just give our listeners that link.
Sure. It's wildslaw.com. That's the last name of our family, WILDESLAW.com. We're about 40 people. We have a terrific partner. His name is Steve Weinberg, so the firm is Wilds and Weinberg, with offices in New York, New Jersey, and Miami, and I'll make a special accommodation financially for the listeners of your glorious radio station.
Absolutely.
The new guidelines you should know are going to be coming in and will allow applicants to be under the age of 30. That cap has been removed.
Right. Before we get into those details, Michael, we're going to take a station break, but I did want to allow our listeners to hear a little bit about the historical background upon which the president's announcement is based before we get into the practical details. We're going to take a station break here. Please hang on with us, Michael. It's just for a couple of minutes, won't you? You're listening to Diplomatically Speaking on WVIP 93.5 FM, the beginning of the year. And we want to acknowledge again our sponsors, starting, of course, with Tower Isle Frozen Foods.
Flavor of the Caribbean to America with Tower Isle's Jamaican-style patties. Available at your local supermarket in beef or chicken. Tower Isles is the leading manufacturer and distributor of Jamaican-style patties and has led the industry in quality food products for more than 45 years. Tower Isles patties are made with the best ingredients. Grade A USDA beef and chunky white chicken breast. Great for a snack or purchase them for your wedding, party, or your restaurant. Enjoy a Jamaican-style patty from Tower Isles. Give them a call at 678-422-3196. That's 678-422-3196. And don't forget to check your local supermarket for Tower Isles Jamaican-style patties.
And Caribbean Life newspaper, the largest Caribbean diaspora newspaper in North America, keeping us up to date and up to speed, and diasporadashboard.com. We're the Caribbean and its diaspora meet, the online destination for all things local in the diaspora in the US, UK, and Canada. Don't forget, promote your events for free on the events calendar. We're going to take a little music break here because, Tessan, she knocked the ball out of the park, as you remember last year with The Voice. And I just think it's great to start the new year reminding us we can be strong. So we're going to play for you now Tessan Chin's version of Stronger.
I best of me. Think you've had the last laugh. Bet you think that everything good is gone. Think that I've been broken down, that I come running back. Baby, you don't know me 'cause you're dead wrong. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Stand a little taller. Doesn't mean I'm lonely when I'm alone. What doesn't kill you makes a fighter. Footsteps deeper lighter. Doesn't mean I'm over 'cause you're gone. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, stronger. Just me, myself, and I. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Stand a little taller. Doesn't mean I'm lonely when I'm alone. You heard that I was starting over with someone new. He told you I was moving on over you. You didn't think that I'd come back swinging. You tried to break me, but you see what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Stand a little taller. Doesn't mean I'm lonely when I'm alone.
What doesn't kill you make you stronger. There's a similar statement of what doesn't kill fattens. I don't know that I like that one, but certainly what doesn't kill you make you stronger. And a lot of people are facing deportation this year. A family member they know about, or maybe even some of you listening, who want to bring some encouragement and some hope to you, and certainly to make the point again that we believe in the rule of law. And if you do the crime, if you are involved in drugs and all of those things, this is not going to be helpful to you. You have to have had a clean slate. And we have a guest, an expert in this, Mr. Michael Wiles, who comes from a generation of persons who are versed in immigration law. And we're very, very pleased. We're going to take this part of the program now to get down to the details so that you listening can use this information for your benefit. Welcome again to the program, Michael. You were there?
I'm here. Thank you again.
Excellent.
Including me. I have to just tell you, my father walked into the room just now, and I didn't even tell him I was doing a radio program, but the legacy of the Lennon case and the whole experience where drugs and immigration and the intersection of mistakes that people make give you the privilege of a second chance on many occasions. If there's a use of marijuana under a certain gram, you could probably get waivers. But once you end up in the world of heroin or cocaine or more serious drug trafficking charges, it's almost inevitable that the only thing a talented immigration lawyer could do would be to get you temporary long-term non-immigrant visiting or working visas. But you lose the prospects for permanent residence completely at that stage. Now, we've had great success in the generations that we've been practicing in bringing people back who over time have shown the government, the American Embassy in the Caribbean countries that your listeners come from, that they have indeed rehabilitated themselves, but this is only if the drug trafficking or the illicit substance use is under a certain stage. And we can imagine as the government is becoming more flexible, it's opening its course of hospitality, that it's going to be stricter on criminals. So I remind your listening audience not to only say no to drugs.
Keep your nose clean.
But that whole song that you played before, "What doesn't kill you will make you stronger," that doesn't work in the world of drugs. Unfortunately, the slightest kind of deviation makes the government and gives them standing to go after. And it's a rarity when a lawyer's successfully able to bring people back.
Well, let me back up a minute.
Joe Cocker passed away
Joe Cocker,
last week. My father helped him also get his green card because when the law changed with John Lennon, it then created a challenge for other rock stars and other people. And the only thing I would, again, urge people is, even with DUIs right now, the government is being very strict for the provision of deferred action.
We were going to get into some of those questions because I was going to ask you what types of cases where people actually had some kind of a record you were able to deal with. But I think I would be remiss and certainly rude if I didn't send out my greetings to your dad, Leon Wiles, who's with you. Nice to know that you're listening, Mr. Wiles, and very much appreciate that you have joined your son in the room. We thank you very much for the work you have done in this area, and certainly are very appreciative that your son will now be taking up the mantle, has taken up the mantle, and will be carrying your work forward. So kudos to you, Mr. Wiles, and blessed and joyous.
That's very
New Year.
kind. Unfortunately, we're not on the speakerphone, but I'm going to send greetings.
Please convey it to him.
To my father, and then back again to you and your beautiful audience.
So let's get into it. We were talking about second chances. You made it very plain. Major crimes like drug trafficking and so on. I don't know that there's much hope there. But in what areas can we say that there is something of a quote-unquote second chance? What kinds of, what you call misdemeanors or criminal prosecutions might one be able to
The government
avoid?
does not allow any of the serious crimes, and they've codified it, as I said earlier, that you have to make sure you weren't convicted of a felony offense. Any felony offense would negate the deferred action, or a significant misdemeanor offense. Now, multiple misdemeanor offenses or otherwise pose a threat to national security or public safety. So when a person is engaged in the DUI, somebody would make the case that that is a significant misdemeanor offense. It certainly impacts on the safety of the community. And other arrangements should be made if you are in a vehicle, if you have drinking something, or if there's somebody with an illicit substance. It's to the point where I have clients where I tell them now, because of minor offenses that they have, that they ought not to physically go in a car without asking their friends to turn out their pockets or make sure that somebody else is driving if they even had a single drink.
Well, that it obvious is good legal advice. But it's what parents should be telling their children in the beginning. Be careful who your friends are. People listening out there, you are careful with whom you associate, because you may not be involved in the crime, but if somebody else is, you're going to be tainted. And so you end up being arrested when you're in a car with somebody who has substances, illegal substances, and you didn't know about it. You have a responsibility as young people to take precautions, to understand who you're with and what your friends are doing.
Not just the young people, adults who get involved or make misjudgments or try to take easy way outs, whether it's on their tax returns or other things that can lead to issues and problems. You need to have one constant role model. To me, it's my father. To others, it could be other friends in the family that are lawyers or have good advice. And again, we have a bar, the American Immigration Lawyers Association. My father was the president of that group in the 1970s. You want to make sure that the lawyer that you engage in is a licensed lawyer and has a fine reputation. You go online and you'll check the reviews of that person, and you're able to call the Bar Association, and you should speak to people that have used them to make sure that they have a good antenna and take their advice and make sure that they give you their cell phone. And in this, it's very important that they only charge you a project-based fee, not hourly, and something modest, because we find a lot of people are being taken advantage of.
Well, it's very interesting, because in this week's newspaper, unfortunately, it's a common thing in our community. It's really horrible, but there are, just in this week's newspaper, we had an attorney who was brought up on charges because she was took some exorbitant amount of money from persons promising to get them green cards and had no ability to do that. So your caution that persons check the backgrounds of attorneys is very important. But in addition to that, Michael, I think you also advocate kind of a flat fee situation. When you ask your attorney, how much is this going to cost? The answer is not. I don't really know. So talk about how attorneys should respond in terms of the fee.
Well, our practice has been to charge an initial consultation fee, and we generally then credit that consultation fee to the case in chief. And we then are very honest with people if we know what our deferred action fee is going to be, and there are standard fees, and then there are deviations depending if we have to help the family package the history of their traverse into the United States, and if there's any challenges that they have with law enforcement and so forth. But fees should be modest, Anybody who's not charging a consultation fee is going to find a lot of people shopping, and you have to be very careful that you get a written agreement for anything over, I believe the amount is $3,000 or $2,500 in New York State. And the agreement should be very clear, and it should, again, protect both parties so that if there's a challenge, it's called a request for further evidence, an RFE in the vernacular, where the government is not satisfied and the lawyer feels they should be entitled to something. Was it the lawyer's fault that they didn't present something in the first instance? Was it the client's fault that they couldn't get something? Communications have to be bilateral. They have to be honest and open, and expectations have to be met. Our practice, you should know, we always try to make it affordable. My consultation fee, my father's and my partner, is $400 for the initial hour, and then we credit that towards the case. I'll do something special for your listening audience, and I'll make sure when they call up and they ask for my assistant, Lexie is her name, Lexie, that we'll put something in place that's a lot more affordable, and they'll still get credit for that consultation fee if we are privileged to earn their trust. And a project fee is what should be charged. No matter how many hours, the law is the law, and your eligibility for it is there or it's not. This is not pregnancy. It's much like pregnancy. It's either you're going to do it or you're not going to do it.
Just because you're 9 months as opposed to 6 months doesn't mean you're not pregnant.
It doesn't make a difference how pregnant you are. It's either yes or it's no.
Right.
And the truth is, if you have exposure and you opt to make the application, you want to make sure then both the lawyer and the client that they have a clear understanding, because now you're knocking on the door. You're telling the government where you live, where you sleep, where you work, and now you're taking chances. So,
well, let's talk about that, because you channeled me there. We mentioned before that 4.4 million undocumented persons are under this. This program is likely to affect. Of that 4.4, 1.2 million were eligible, and I'll go over the 5 points of eligibility. But less than 700,000 have applied. So there is some exposure to applying for this program. Could you explain?
Yeah, by all means. Once you let the government know where you are, if you're not eligible, it will have been the most foolish thing in the world to make the application.
Right.
You should know, in the context of giving amnesty or other benefits to the illegally present community, even under President Reagan, when he did it, and that was the last time we had a real comprehensive change to the law, he recognized that anybody who came into America before 1982 would be eligible. Nobody trusted the president was truthful, so they set up offices outside of the federal building. People thought that this was just a big guise to round up all the undocumented aliens and to have them deported. They actually, on 24th Street, had to set up an amnesty or a legalization office so that people would not see police and uniforms and everybody outside of the building and be worried. But under these new guidelines, the requirements that the applicant be under a certain age was removed.
Right.
Also, the June 2012 cutoff was moved ahead to January 2015, allowing another generation of people who entered the United States between June of 2007 and January of 2010 will now be eligible for the first time. And the president is now saying that the validity of this deferred action status will be valid for 3 years rather than 2 years, requiring, if you're going to a lawyer, less of a fee and an easier process, because the government is trying to make this user-friendly.
I wasn't clear on your answer with respect to risk. What I'm talking about specifically is, let's say you apply and you did not get it. Well, now the government has your information. What is your suggestion to mitigate that problem? Can an attorney
help
question. To give
Very
you
good
some...
question. So if you are ineligible and you make the application, by your own admission, you've knocked on the door and told the government who you are, where you are, and it was a foolhardy admission. If you're not sure, you ought not to do it and consult with a lawyer. And if for some reason you don't get it, which is a shocking experience because all of our applicants have gotten it, frankly, and we don't make the application if there's a question even of eligibility. The government has said in the gentleman's way that they will not go after people based on the submission of a request. But now, if they can come to you from another direction, and you've given them a treasure trove of intelligence and information for them to find you on your own, because you're giving in school records, medical records, and so forth, you can expect that you might have an issue.
Of course.
So it would be good advice to make sure you read the eligibility, you take counsel with somebody,
Right.
and then you think about it, and then you hire the lawyer
Right,
if
right.
you feel that you're
Right.
eligible. And if anybody has issues or questions, even on the telephone without fee, we're happy if they just mention your name to give them quick advice and get them in fast if we have
Excellent. And the issue of eligibility is one that is best understood with the assistance of an attorney looking at the individual's record and making some kind of judgment going forward. So it sounds like you are not recommending that somebody apply before making,
Well,
if they have some glitch in the record, let's say.
It's kind of like a tax return. You can do it on your own, but it would be foolish to do it on your own. And you have to look at the deferred action program as a tool in the toolbox. It's only one tool. There may be, we've found clients of ours who come in because of that, who are actually citizens because of a derivation they had from a grandparent
Right.
or a parent who had made an application who was eligible to convey another remedy to them because of the timing of the parent's application independent of the deferred action. In fact, I would recommend that everybody develop a relationship with an immigration lawyer that they trust because, like I said, this is a Band-Aid. This is good for 3 years. Who knows who the new president's going
Right.
to be and what's going to be in the future?
Right.
And you need to trust the person that brought you to the dance.
Right.
Now, you don't have to have a lawyer do this, but I think if you can afford it, it's so much better. And if there are other remedies, or if they take away some of the benefits as they politically deal
Right.
with what the president will leave the
Right.
new president,
Right.
it's important for somebody to understand the context as well. And finally, I have to tell you, we have a life experience dealing with some of the shades of gray where somebody is about to face charges, or because when they made the application, everything was clear, but then they get stopped for a DUI while the application is pending, because these things can take time and a while.
Right.
You don't want to then find yourself having made a poor application, and a lot of the individuals do this. They don't keep copies. They don't fill it out properly. They do it with a hand, with a pen, rather than typing it. This thing should be practically polished and ready to go, and a few eyes set on it. In our office, we have a protocol, so it's not just one person, but several that see the applications.
It's a lot to think about. It's a lot to pull together and think about. And I think, this show is important, hearing it, having you on. But I think, Michael, that we need a series of workshops or fora within the community. The network, the church network, I think is perfect to be able to bring this information to the community. Otherwise, that 700,000, less than 700,000, applicants, will be just a small number, will remain as a fraction of the percentage of the persons who are really eligible. One question,
The
another
church
question.
community is the perfect premise. We've seen it with, believe it or not, synagogues and mosques, churches, all kinds of social service programs. I have a lot of my students that participate on the side, and they devote their time in the evenings and weekends, and I'm happy if asked to bring some of the lawyers down to different churches and communities without fee and see that we explain to the community, and we meet with people who can't afford any fee to make sure they're given good advice.
Well, if you would like, Michael, I will certainly make myself available to you if this is something you want to do, to help organize a series of fora within the community. We're a lot in Bronx, Brooklyn, and Queens. In the New York area to get this information out. Because I think, my experience as Consul General is that we had to continually be out there informing our community, taking questions, because a one-off situation is not enough. I want to go back
when
to
you were Consul General,
Yes.
you developed a treasure trove, a Rolodex of talent, and this is the time to cash in on it for the community, and we're honored to make ourselves available again without fee, and I'll follow your lead and directions on that.
Oh, thank you. I will get back to you on that, actually, I promise. You mentioned 5 specific criteria. My question would be, do all of these criteria have to exist in an eligible candidate? 1, that they arrived in the United States under the age of 16, are under the age of 30, have continuously resided in the United States for at least 5 years, preceding June 15, 2012, and are present in the U.S. on June 15, 2012. are currently in school, have graduated from high school, and have obtained a general education development certificate, or are honorably discharged veterans of the Coast Guard or Armed Forces of the U.S., and finally have not been convicted of felony offense, a significant misdemeanor offense, multiple misdemeanor offenses, or otherwise pose a threat to national security or public safety. That's interesting. That's a kind of nebulous one, or pose a threat.
That's right, and that's where we're seeing most of the questionable cases.
Right.
To answer your question, absolutely yes. You need to be qualified on all 5 grounds, otherwise you're ineligible.
I see. And this
most
area...
importantly, for the first time, a benefit is being offered to adults, to the parents of U.S. citizens and lawful permanent residents, those are green card holders, who have been in America since January of 2010. They'll now be eligible. They will be eligible for deferred action under a new deferred action program called Parental Accountability Program, the DAPA. The children are the DACA, the parents are the DAPA. The people that won't qualify are parents of a DACA applicant will not qualify. In other words, for a parent to qualify, they must have had a U.S. citizen or a green card holder child in America, as well as kids who enter the United States after the age of 16, they won't be eligible.
Michael, let's break down the acronym. DAPA and DACA. DAPA is Deferred Action for Parental Accountability.
That's right.
DACA?
DACA is the Deferred Action for Early Childhood Arrivals.
Got it. Okay.
So those are for children.
Right.
DAPA are for parents, and a parent who's a parent of a DACA eligible national will not get DAPA status.
Mm-hmm.
They must have a citizen or a permanent resident child.
I see.
And have made the application by the cutoff time.
I see. Now, the fact is that the regulations are still to be published by the government, right?
Correct.
All right.
The president said that they would be out within 90 days, and it's still within that wiggle room time.
Right.
We're waiting for the regulations to be published. When they are published, and they're likely to announce a target date that they'll begin accepting applications under these guidelines as to who will be qualified. The original 2012 guidelines will be included and explained, and we're, in fact, applying for extensions at this time for the first group of applicants.
I see.
And each year, a new DACA student who gets older enough can go into the system, and it's important for us to meet with all the family members. And the client here is the individual. I don't care how old the child is. And there may be potential conflicts here. If a child had a DUI or a drug conviction and the parents aren't aware of it, you must work dutifully and under the ethics and the canons of our field to make sure that you protect every individual, and the propriety and the words and the confidentiality of all this has to be done properly too. It's the family dynamic, which in of itself is highly political.
Right. Well, there's a lot of information here. In addition just to the strict information, we're still waiting for guidelines. This is a situation where we have an extension now for 3 years. Lord only knows what will happen when the new administration comes in. So there's a lot of information to process. And it's important to have the assistance of a well-qualified and a conversant attorney in this area. Not all immigration attorneys have the kind of expertise and are fully au fait with the details of the new announcement, the new immigration deferred deportation
Your audience
policy.
Has a range of life experience. There are estimated to be over 11 million undocumented individuals in this country. This will affect about 4 million. There are still 7 million who should familiarize themselves, develop a trust and a relationship with somebody, so that if the law changes or there is eligibility that can be derived from other remedies or applications that were made in the family or other life circumstances, that they draw that conclusion and don't draw it themselves based on what people feel that they're eligible for or based on people that are less than reputable.
Well, a lot said. I wanted to share with our listeners your website, rather, where they can go and see the interview.
Sure. It's www.wildslaw.com. That's W-I-L-D as in David, E-S as in Sam, L-A-W.com. That's our last name. That's our website, wildslaw.com. You can like our Facebook which is Wiles and Weinberg Immigration Law Offices, and we're putting up notifications on our website, on our Facebook, and we're honored, again, to learn and to educate the community as the regulations come out. The target date was 3 months after the president's announcement, and the DAPA program for parents is targeted to go in effect 6 months from the date of the announcement.
10 seconds, Michael. Sorry.
And we're looking forward, ultimately, for this diamond in the rough, this nation, this president, and the next one, to get this right. The greatest entrepreneurs and people that this nation has seen are the immigrants.
And if you have a problem, check the website. And if you, when you call or when you go online, when you call the office, ask for Lexi. Lexi is Michael's personal assistant. And as you heard Michael say, he will give a special fee for listeners who reference this program. Michael, you're going to be back as a regular guest on this program, because this is hot, this is topical, this is very relevant to, unfortunately, a large percentage of our listening audience. And we're very, very glad that you were able to give us some time today to drill down.
You're very kind also, and I'm speaking on behalf of your audience as a former mayor myself and saying thank you for the service that you're rendering with this valuable airtime to educate them and help their families.
Happy New Year. Blessed New Year to you, Michael. Talk to you soon again.
You as well. A blessed New Year.
Take good care now. There you have it, Michael Wiles holding forth with me on deportation deferred deportation, part of the immigration policy just announced by our President Barack Obama in November of last year. Regulations still to be written on this, but very much a live issue. And if you want more information on this, you should get on the website, www.wiles.law.com. Thank you very much for listening to Diplomatically Speaking. This is Doc Brown Metzger here with you again. Thank you for tuning in. We'll be back next Sunday with another very important program. Can't tell you yet who our guest is. We know, but we want it to be a surprise. Have a joyous and blessed New Year, and we thank our sponsors.